The integrity of elections, well, it's really the bedrock of any democracy, isn't it? It's how the people's voice gets heard, how power is supposed to shift legitimately. But what happens when that foundation itself, specifically the institution meant to guarantee fairness, comes under really intense scrutiny, serious allegations flying around? Today, we're doing a deep dive into exactly that kind of critical situation. We've got a whole stack of sources here looking at the Election Commission of India, the ECI. This is the body, that runs elections in the world's biggest democracy, and it's recently faced this barrage of allegations, calls for major reform. So our mission here is to unpack all these claims, look at how the ECI has responded, get into the wider context, and hopefully give you a really clear understanding of what's truly at stake. All right, let's get into it. The Election Commission of India, I mean, it's arguably one of the most powerful independent bodies in the country. Its whole job, constitutionally mandated, is ensuring free and fair elections, everything from putting together voter lists meticulously right through to declaring the final results. And for decades, it's mostly been seen as, impartial, an umpire. But that view, well, it's been seriously challenged lately. And at the core of it all is this really stark accusation: vote theft.
Yeah, the opposition leader Rahul Gandhi has been very vocal. He's explicitly accused the ECI of, well, colluding with the ruling BJP to manipulate the electoral rolls. And it's not just a general complaint. He's pointed to specific, what he calls systemic irregularities. The main example he's used is from the Mahadevapura constituency down in Karnataka during the 2024 Lok Sabha elections. He's alleged things like widespread duplicate entries on the voter lists, loads of invalid addresses, these suspicious bulk registrations, and even invalid photos being used. And to give you a sense of the detail here, the claims aren't vague. Gandhi presented internal research with some pretty startling figures. They're alleging almost 12,000 duplicate voters, 11,956 to be exact, so people listed more than once. Then over 40,000 entries, 40,009 found with invalid addresses. That raises questions, right? Phantom voters, non-existent addresses.
And this bulk registration thing is particularly eyebrow-raising. Over 10,000 instances, including one example that got a lot of attention. 80 voters apparently registered at just one single residential address. Plus, the research pointed to over 4,000 invalid photos and nearly 34,000 cases of what they called Form 6 misuse. That's about the forms for new voter registration.
Yeah, and what's really insightful here, I think, is the precision of these allocations. When you put out specific numbers like that, 11,956 duplicates, 40,009 invalid addresses, it fundamentally changes the conversation. It moves it away from just, general political noise. The ECI then isn't just batting away vague accusations. They almost have to respond with equally detailed refutations or show their investigation. That level of detail sort of weaponizes the claims, doesn't it? It makes them harder to just dismiss as politics as usual. It demands a much clearer accounting.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Form 6 misuse. Maybe we should quickly clarify what that actually involves, because it sounds quite technical, but seems central here.
Exactly. Form 6 is, well, it's fundamental. It's the form citizens use to get on the electoral roll for the first time, or if they move constituency, or even to get a replacement voter ID card, the EPIC. So alleging misuse of Form 6 is serious because it hits right at the entry point for the voter list. It could mean, hypothetically, registering people who don't exist or creating fake entries using real names but maybe dodgy addresses, or even, shifting real voters around without them knowing, making it hard for them to vote where they actually live, disenfranchising them indirectly. Any of that obviously undermines the whole one-person, one-vote idea, either by inflating the list or messing with legitimate voters.
Okay, that context makes the ECI's reaction even more significant. And like you said, they didn't just brush it off. They came back really hard. They flatly rejected the claims, and the language they used was, well, remarkably strong.
Yeah, they put out this very forceful public statement. They directly addressed that term vote chori, which means vote theft. They called it a dirty phrase. Said it dishonors not just the millions of voters who participate, but also the hundreds of thousands of election staff. The people working on the ground, often in tough conditions, to make elections happen fairly.
And that strong language, plus their demand for, specific, verifiable evidence, signed declarations, affidavits that's really rooted in how they've always operated. Since India's first elections back in 1951, that principle of one person, one vote has been central. They rely on a system, historically, with checks, balances, public display of rolls for verification. So when they ask for hard evidence, it's not just dismissing things, it's them insisting on due process. They need claims that can be properly investigated and verified. It's about protecting the system's integrity from charges that might not hold up, no matter who's making them. For a body like the ECI, public trust is everything, so they need that rigorous standard. It puts the onus back on the accusers.
Right, prove it. So, okay, what did all this mean then politically? Because these weren't just arguments in press releases or legal filings. This spilled over. It really ignited a political firestorm, didn't it? Bringing these simmering tensions right out onto the streets. It went beyond paper claims to, real world impact. We saw that very clearly on August 11th, 2025. Opposition leaders decided to take their complaints public in a big way. Rahul Gandhi, along with around 300 other opposition figures, they were actually detained in Delhi during quite a large protest. Their protest was directly aimed at these alleged electoral malpractices and what they saw as the ECI either not acting or, worse, being complicit. It showed things had really escalated.
And if you connect those protests to the bigger picture, they really highlight this growing kind of nationwide concern about how voter rolls are revised and the potential for people being unfairly removed, disenfranchised. This becomes incredibly sensitive, especially with important state elections coming up, like the Bihar assembly elections were at that point. The stakes feel really high for the parties, obviously, but more fundamentally, for citizens wanting to exercise their vote. These protests reflect a real public anxiety about whether future elections will be fair. It turns these seemingly technical admin processes into very hot political issues.
And speaking of Bihar, that's where this whole voter roll controversy really came to a head, didn't it? With that special intensive revision, the SCR. The ECI launched this Sura of electoral rolls in Bihar. And the central criticism, the big fear, was that this process, as it was initially set up, could end up disenfranchising millions of genuine voters. And the argument was it would hit marginalized communities and migrant workers hardest, people who often struggle more with documentation. Why? Because the initial rules for this SR were surprisingly strict. They initially excluded really common documents like the Aadhaar card, the EPIC voter ID itself, even ration cards, as proof for verification. Instead, they were asking for other documents that many people just don't have easy access to. It created huge hurdles for a lot of ordinary people trying to confirm they were eligible to vote.
Exactly. And disenfranchisement here, we should be clear, means wrongly removing eligible voters from a list or making it practically impossible for them to get on it or stay on it. The worry with the Bihar SIR was precisely that by demanding less common documents, maybe speeding up deletions, you could get large numbers of people knocked off the rolls by mistake, especially those vulnerable groups. Just imagine if you're a daily wage laborer, moving for work seasonally, or from a community that's historically found it hard to get official ID, suddenly needing obscure documents, maybe with tight deadlines. It puts a massive burden on people. They could lose their vote just because of bureaucracy, not because they aren't citizens or residents. That creates this real tension, doesn't it, between trying to clean up the rolls and making sure everyone eligible can actually vote.
So with millions potentially affected and the political temperature rising, it felt almost inevitable that this would land up before the Supreme Court. And indeed, the highest court did get involved, recognizing just how serious these concerns were for basic voting rights. The court started hearing a really important case, Association for Democratic Reforms versus the ECI. It directly challenged the legality, the fairness of this whole special intensive revision process in Bihar. And then, very quickly, on August 14th, 2025, the court issued a really significant interim order, a big move. It told the ECI, first, publish a full list of all 6.5 million voters who were deleted from the draft rolls in Bihar, and provide specific reasons for each deletion. Transparency. And second, and this was crucial, it ordered the ECI to accept objections to these deletions if people could support them with their Aadhaar card or their EPIC voter ID, the very documents initially excluded.
Yeah, that intervention by the Supreme Court is fascinating. It shows the judiciary not just interpreting law, but actively demanding specific actions, accountability, transparency from the ECI, especially when fundamental rights, like voting, are potentially affected on such a massive scale. It really underlines the court's role as a guardian, doesn't it? Pushing for processes that are clearer and more accessible for ordinary citizens. It acts as a vital check, even on an independent body like the ECI. It shows that while the ECI has autonomy, it's not above judicial oversight when the core principles of the electoral process are questioned. It basically forced a rethink on accessibility.
But this whole situation, it goes beyond just specific cases like Bihar or the immediate controversy around vote theft allegations, right? There seem to be these deeper, more systemic worries about the ECI's independence. We've heard criticism growing from various political figures. Former Rajasthan Chief Minister Ashok Gehlot, for instance, openly expressed concerns about the Commission's impartiality. And a major focus of this concern has been legislative changes made back in 2023 regarding how election commissioners are appointed. Historically, the Chief Justice of India used to be on the selection committee. That brought a kind of judicial, non-executive perspective to the appointments. But under a new law passed last year, the Chief Justice was replaced on that committee by the Union Home Minister.
Right. And that specific change is what critics really seize on as potentially undermining the ECI's institutional autonomy, or at least the perception of its autonomy and fairness. The argument is pretty straightforward. Taking away the Chief Justice, someone from an independent branch of government, and putting in a senior cabinet minister from the ruling party, well, it introduces the potential for political influence in choosing the referees, essentially. Now, the government might argue it streamlines things or it's their right to legislate, but critics say it creates, at minimum, a perception problem. How independent can the ECI truly be if its leaders are chosen by the government of the day? It raises that fundamental question, doesn't it, about how changes to appointment processes affect public trust. And for an electoral body, that trust is paramount. The long-term effects on the ECI's ability to act impartially without fear or favor, that's really the heart of the debate now.
So wrapping this all up, what does it mean for you, the listener, the voter, and maybe for the direction of Indian democracy? We've unpacked quite a complex and still unfolding situation here. You've got these serious allegations of vote theft. You've got major protests happening and significant interventions from the highest court. All of it is shaping how people see India's election commission.
It's definitely a stark reminder. While the ECI has this long history, generally respected, of running India's massive elections, these recent events really highlight some significant ongoing challenges. Keeping an electoral body robust, transparent, and crucially, trusted by everyone that's not just nice to have for a democracy, it's absolutely essential for its legitimacy, especially in a country as huge and diverse as India. Public trust isn't optional, it's the bedrock.
Absolutely. So, considering everything we've discussed, the detailed allegations, the ECI's strong pushback, the Supreme Court demanding transparency, and those underlying concerns about how commissioners are appointed, it leaves us with a final thought for you to consider. What role do you think transparency and genuine external oversight really play? How vital are they in maintaining the integrity and, just as importantly, the public's trust in electoral processes within a large, vibrant democracy like India? Something to mull over.